Okay. So we can start. So hi everyone. My name is Olivia. Oh, can everybody hear me? Um, oh, and if you guys, I mean, not to say you guys have to, but if you guys wanted to also like show your face and like come back, y'all can do that as well, since we're going to be introducing ourselves and stuff. But that's up to you all. So yeah, my name is Olivia Fenty. I am the founder and creative director of the Chakra Project. And for those who don't know, the Chakra Project is an initiative that strives to promote love, respect, and sisterhood. And the Chakra Project is an initiative that strives to promote love, respect, and sisterhood in the Black femme community through bonding and artistic spaces. And so basically just a space for Black femmes to feel seen and for us to talk our shit. I think that's very important. And so yeah, before I go into like what the topic is and stuff, we can just go around. You can introduce yourself, say your name, your preferred pronouns, where you're signing in from. And also if you haven't put that in your like your name and stuff, you can also include that just so people are like mindful and stuff when we have the conversation. And yeah, so who wants to start?
I can start.
Okay.
My name is Carrie. I am I'm in Atlanta. I don't know what else should I say besides my from. That's it.
I said the pronouns as well, but they're already in your life.
My pronouns are they, them. And I'm really happy to be here with y'all.
I'm happy here too. Anybody else?
I can go next. Can everyone hear me?
Mhm.
Okay, cool. My name is Jess. My pronouns are she, they, and I am calling in from Chicago. So I'm in Central Time. And I think that's it. And yeah, I'm super happy to be part of this conversation.
Anything else?
Hi, my name is Blessed. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm also calling in from Chicago, and I'm very happy to be here right now.
My name is Queen Cheyenne. I use they, she pronouns, and I'm calling in from Cambridge, Boston. And also really, really happy and excited to get to know everybody and talk with everybody about the different topics.
My name is Christiana. I have she, her pronouns, and I'm calling in from Chicagoland. So like closing out.
I forgot to say where I'm signing in from. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm signing in from Fitchburg, Massachusetts. So it's like a little bit further away from Boston. And yeah, so I'm so excited for you all to be here too and to just have this conversation with you guys. So just a little bit of background about what we're talking about, just like with reference for people who are going to be watching it, is so I got this idea for this talk from a Toni Morrison quote. I'm not too sure where. I think honestly it was in her book Sula, but I'm not entirely sure. But the quote is, "What choices are available to Black women outside of their society's approval? What are the risks of individualism in a determinately individualistic yet racially uniform and socially static community?" And so I kind of like, when I initially heard it, it really made me think like, oh wow, especially because of the time period in which the book was written. I think it was just a very like, not radical in a sense, but it's just I was surprised that she had mentioned that in that time period. And it just made me think of the idea of individualism and what does individualism mean as a Black femme, and how do we kind of like craft our individualism, especially considering the fact that we all have different ideas of what femininity is, and we all have different ideas of like what masculinity is and like how that encompasses our identity, if that makes sense. That was a lot, sorry, but I hope that made sense. So I was just really interested in how other people thought about this, because I feel like I'm always having like existential questions, and so I'm very interested to hear what like everybody else thinks and how they're processing it. And so yeah. And so really quickly before we get right into the questions, I just wanted to define two terms that are going to be used like all throughout the questions, just so everybody kind of knows what it means if they don't. One term is monolithic, which just means large, powerful, and inattractively indivisible and uniform. And so that was just the textbook definition, but I was using it in the sense of like people assuming that Black femmes are all the same, that we think the same, that we move the same. And then individualism, which is the habit or principle of being independent and self-reliant. It's also a social theory favoring freedom of action for individuals over collective state control. So I also thought that second definition tied a little bit into some of the questions that we're going to get into. And just thinking of like, what does being individualistic even mean? And why do we always have to strive for that? And like what that means, I guess, in opposition to collectivism. And thinking as a community and finding yourself within a community. So the first question that we're going to start off with is, has anyone ever assumed anything about you because you are a Black femme? Whether it's like acting a certain way or like personality traits.
I actually, it's really interesting because it's actually a teacher that we both had, Olivia, but there was a teacher who one day, I don't know what I was talking about, or apparently the way that the teacher had seen it was I had only talked about my mom in class. So they did not assume that I had a father. And so then when my dad came into school during the parent-teacher conferences, the teacher had been like, wow, I didn't know Queen had a father in her life. And this was something that I don't know was necessarily connected to being Black femme, but it was something that was very, very interesting during that time that me and my mother both kind of looked at each other and my dad all at the conference. That was very, very weird to just assume that it was only just me and my mom. Even though I had talked about my family before, I had definitely talked about the fact that I have sisters. I live in a 2-parent household. And it was just a very interesting, very awkward experience where the teacher didn't apologize and just had kind of tried to brush past the incident. But I do think that is also a larger context to the idea of like independent Black women, that like we, like don't need a man, like we don't have men in our lives, that there aren't men in our lives who can be, intentionally graceful, caring, supportive and consistent, and that it's only that Black women and Black mothers are the only ones who can foster and create family. And so I thought that was something that was very, very interesting, at least something that just came very quickly to my head about an instance that I was just, me and my mom specifically had kind of looked at each other in a way that was just like, was this also just because you had assumed that because me and my mom, I talked more about my mom, that it was just me and my mom and my sisters, that it was only Black women in this space. So yeah, I thought that was definitely really interesting, and an assumption that, could have been largely towards like, Black folks, Black men, Black, gender nonconforming folks, Black femmes. But I definitely thought was a very interesting type of comment that the teacher had made based on kind of the way that they thought I had presented it myself.
Going off of the whole independent Black woman idea. So I'm a junior in college, and I remember freshman year talking to a friend who's actually a woman of color too. And she mentioned like, oh, Christiana, you're like so independent and stuff. And I was like, you've heard me talking about these little boys like nonstop since I got here, drama there. Like, what makes you think like I'm the strong, independent Black woman or whatever, you know? So, even things like that, which I think also ties into like girlhood and like Black teenagers not really being allowed to have those like soft crushes or being like boy crazy or anything like that, you know, or even terms like boy crazy, just like assuming that, you know, again, heteronormative. But yeah, just things like that that just really got under my skin. Or when I remember it so clearly, because I think it's happened like 3 times, but I would be talking to someone and it's all been men actually who have done this. And they're like, wow, you're so soft. And I'm like why is that a surprise, you know? I don't know what I've done to make you think I'm like harder or anything or can like take it all. Like I cry at the drop of a hat and everything. Like it's just so frustrating to feel like a contradiction all the time.
Just to go off of that, especially the idea of like being strong, like I feel like I've always had to, and I think this is also come from other Black femmes as well as like just other Black people of assuming that like, oh, you got it, like you don't like even like oh, you don't need no help, like you got it, like you're okay, like you'll get through it, and it's like sometimes it's like no, I'm struggling, and I need you to be able, I don't know, I need you to be able to validate that and not make me feel like I'm like I gotta be the strong one, like the strong Black woman. Like, I don't know. I feel like that dehumanizes us. And I feel like it also just doesn't leave room. Cause like you were saying, of like, what if you do feel like you don't got it all? And then you're stuck in this moment of like feeling like you're a contradiction or feeling like, damn, like maybe I'm weak because I can see them doing it over there and they're taking it. But it's like in actuality, like everybody's struggling. And yeah, I feel like the strong Black woman trope is something that I feel like comes up, especially from other Black people, especially from other Black fans, which I always found to be very interesting, in terms of the way that they view their own pain and the way they make space for their own pain. Yeah.
I can share. So recently, as in like for the past like 3 or 4 months, um, I've been living with a roommate who's like questioned my gender identity. Yeah, faces, yeah. Um, and originally, like when we all like start moving in together, I was like, hey, my name is Carrie. My pronouns are they, them. I'm a Black femme. I don't use the term women to define myself. And that's how I introduce myself. And so my roommate questioned like my genitalia. Yeah. And so that was like very traumatic for me. And I was carrying like a lot of like stress and anger for like the past like 3 months. And I finally got the courage to say, hey, like I honestly don't feel comfortable talking to you and you're very disrespectful. And I would like to reserve my time for me and I won't like engage with you anymore. So that was like one of like the biggest lessons I have learned about like what femmehood looks for me. And I honestly like talk about it in therapy a lot because I'm like, I get to decide what it looks like, not you. And so that's been like one of my big wins for the year, like saying it out loud.
Yeah, I think I'll also jump in right here. I'm sorry, I'm gonna be like blowing my nose in and out. My allergies are not happy right now. Um, but I think similarly, that's maybe one of the things about femmehood also is that like I think I realized that because I was socialized as girl and as woman specifically, there are a lot of like prescriptions in terms of like what those things actually are and like what makes a good girl or what makes a good like woman or all of these other things. And I find that people are often impressing those things upon me like frequently when it's like I don't care about being a good any of those. Like I don't believe that there is a good version of any of these things to begin with, right? And yet like it's really interesting to just like realize that I now feel like an outsider from that identity. Like I think, for example, like, you know, two things recently happened for me. Like I'm wanting to get a new tattoo, another tattoo. I had a friend commission it for me. I wanted it to be like a person with an afro, but like originally my friend drew it more like Black woman. So like the person had earrings and stuff and like a very identifiable face. I was like, I don't really want it to be super identifiable in a gender sense. So I asked, you know, like I asked her to like cover the face with an afro, like cover the face with the hair, so only the nose, and like take off the earrings. And I loved it after that point. And then I showed my mom, and then she was like, I don't like it. And she didn't like it specifically because it did not look like what a woman should look like, right? And then I had another instance with like a cousin of mine. We were like smoking or whatever. And it's like this person got out of the car and she was wearing like sports bra and some shorts, and he basically like called her a little slut. And I was like, why would you say that to me? Why would you say that to me? It's like, because she has a sports bra and some shorts. Like, are you kidding me? Like, I'm thinking about the way that that there was a very clear binary drawn there in terms of like, oh, good, this is a good prescription of womanhood, like from you, and like her prescription of like womanhood is that, and but even the assumption that like I would prescribe to those things in the first place was just like, or that even she prescribes to those things in the first place was just like extremely frustrating. And I think just in general, like walking that line, like as a femme, when you like visually, like, yes, I identify with femininity in so many ways, right? I mean, I'm also socialized like as a woman, and there's like so many parts of my identity that are very much so linked to that. And also, I don't believe that any of these categories have to look like anything that most people think that they have to look like.
Yeah, if I can just really quickly jump in, because I really identify with what you were saying, Jess, of specifically also thinking about the ways that as Black women and Black femmes, we can be also barred from the idea of femininity and womanhood. There was an instance when I was in college. I graduated a year ago, which is crazy to think about now from college. But I was in class with one of my best friends who is visibly light-skinned. And we were always close to each other. We're each other's ride or dies to this day. And we were like just always chilling on campus. Everybody always associated us with each other. And we were in a class together where there was specifically a dark-skinned Black man, cis Black man, who would constantly sexualize her and would like say her name in like exotic type of ways, like to try to make her, you know, seem like, you know, she wasn't Black, or that it was better for her to be, you know, culturally ambiguous. And so she did something that was actually very funny, where like she basically like burped in his face to like just be like, get the fuck out of my face. And he was so astonished. His response though was, I would have expected this from Queen. I wouldn't have expected it from you. And we were just so taken aback by the comment. Mind you, this was in my sophomore year. So it was one of those moments where you just don't even know what to say, because it's in the middle of class with a bunch of predominantly white students. We were the only Black people in the class. Our teacher was like a liberalized Black woman who very much like wanted to keep her job and did not like talking about race. So colorism was something that she never touched. And it was just a really uncomfortable moment where me and my friend had to unpack it with one another more than even confronting it to that guy. And it's something that still very much sits with me today about how I have to be a lot softer in certain spaces to be accepted or to be seen as valid. And I also think a lot of like what you were saying, Christina, about like also me being soft. Like I'm a crier. That's how I express myself. When I'm angry, I cry. When I'm happy, I cry. When I'm sad, I can cry through a lot of different emotions. And a lot of times that is usually perceived as weakness for me, rather than being perceived as me understanding and actually expressing the full capacity of my emotion. And I think in that moment, it was also a moment where my friend, as a light-skinned Black woman, was not also allowed to be seen as angry, was also not allowed to be seen as like distasteful. And that was only associated with me because I was darker. And I think that's something that I still sit with a lot today about just me and my friend and how we have moved through the world. We do a lot of work together in community spaces, and how proximity to whiteness and proximity to what is deemed as softer or more acceptable versions of what it means to be a Black woman are usually not given to me, just because of the way that I show up in space. So I just really wanted to like affirm what everybody was saying, but also like really connecting some of the things that Jess and Christina were talking about that really resonated with me.
Just to jump off from that really quickly, that also really resonated with me as well, because I feel like I didn't have like it wasn't until my junior year of undergrad, because I graduated in May. And yeah, that does feel really hella surreal. But anyway, when I was a junior in undergrad, I went to DC for the semester, and I think that was when I had like my big culture shock of like the ways that femininity is perceived in like not other states, but just other communities, and kind of how people can have different ideas and like what it looks like can be different. And I remember going out with my friend, and she's a lot more feminine than me in terms of just like wearing heels, wearing dresses, and doing all that. That was always not something that I really like felt comfortable doing. And I noticed that when we would go out, that would be like the default of what you would have to wear to even get in spaces, to get into the party, to get into the club. It's like, why don't you have a dress and heels on? Like, what are you looking like? Why are you wearing sneakers? And I remember like when we would go out and dudes would interact with us, I remember noticing that people would be more inclined to talk to her because she was the more softer, feminine one. And people would be like, when they would come up to me, they would be a lot more like rough. Just in how they would approach me, how they would talk to me. I would just be like, why are you talking to me like that? Like, why are you talking to her so soft? And then you come up to me like, what's up? Like, I don't know. It would just be so like, why are you talking like that? And why do you think that that's how I want to be approached in comparison to her? And I think that was when I kind of had my big shock of like, I don't think that the perceived idea of femininity connects with what I want to be represented with, and it doesn't align with who I am, and it doesn't make me feel comfortable, and I don't want to have to try to fit into that in order to just like exist. And so it kind of made me go through of like, what does femininity look like? And I think that was the year that I discovered the term femme and realized that it was like possible, because I feel like I don't know. I feel like I was going through this whole thing of like, what does femininity look like? Can I redefine it for myself, or do I have to then embrace masculinity, or just all these different questions? And so I feel like, what you all were saying really resonated with me in terms of just like femininity not always aligning with how you want to be seen and perceived in the world, and having instances where people are kind of like holding you to that idea. And then almost like punishing you in a way when you don't want to go like align with that. Yeah. Was there anything else anybody wanted to say for this question before we move on to the second question?
Yeah. I just wanted to say, like, Queen, what you said resonated with me. And just this idea that even like it's a bad thing to be weak. I've really been thinking about this a lot. I don't know why people avoid weakness. I don't know why people avoid vulnerability. I think it has a lot to do with like, patriarchy being all about dominance and then capitalism being about dominance and that combining so that like anytime someone is seen as like fragile or soft, it's a bad thing. And I, for one, am over it. Like, I don't take it as a compliment when people call me strong. I don't take it as a compliment when people are like, wow, you have it all together. Like, screw that. Like, I'm a human being and I would like to be treated as one. Like, I don't know if this will be addressed in other questions, but I would love to know how people even express their gender identity when a lot of times Black women aren't even fully seen as feminine, if that makes sense. Because like we're talking about it, and like I've definitely like met people who don't even really associate femininity with me at all. And like granted, I am a dark-skinned Black woman. I'm like 6 feet tall, like all that, and love it. Wouldn't change it for the world. But I was just wondering how everyone feels about that. But yeah. And also it's Christiana, not Christina, but everyone makes that mistake. No, you're so good. You're so good.
We can address Christiana's question. How can do y'all think about it?
I think for me, one of the biggest things that I think shifted for me, because I think I'm newly identifying with they pronouns and like as a femme. So it's only really been since like March, April that I started like reconfiguring my gender identity. And quite frankly, it was because of like the relationship that I had just had a very on and off relationship that I was in like for the past 2 years, and it was, I think it was finally time for me to exit. But so much of that relationship, I was defaulting to like a lot of internalized misogyny and like a lot of patriarchal, I think, expectations that I don't really think that my partner always necessarily had. I mean, don't get me wrong, he really wasn't perfect, but in a lot of ways, I was defaulting to certain things that even if he wasn't like requiring those things of me, he was still very much so benefiting from, right? So those things being a lot of like doing things that he wanted to do and like with not necessarily saying what I wanted to do or like what I wanted or I mean it even got to a certain point where I couldn't even feel what I wanted to do. Like I would just automatically like default in that way. And I think leaving that relationship is interesting for me to witness the ways that he would like deal with her versus like dealing with me and some of the issues that I had around like my internalized misogyny and like patriarchy, and realizing that like yeah, even though I'm doing a lot of things, like I have a lot of bad habits in terms of like fawning and like not saying, like not being able to set boundaries and like all of those things. I felt like I was not met with the same softness, right, that I felt like he was meeting her with, in terms of whenever she would be like angry and things like that, right? But like, and he would sort of have this idea of like, I don't want a partner who can't stand up for themselves. I don't want a partner who can't like say what they need, or like I don't want a partner who's gonna, fall into this like 50s woman stereotype, right? But like that also is something that needs working through. Like, I'm not fucking doing that because I like doing that. Like, I'm not doing that because I want to be that. Like, I'm doing that because throughout my life, that's what everyone has told me that I need to do in order to be loved, in order to be accepted. And so, like, I also need softness when like working through those things. And I think that realization for me was like what really set me off in terms of like, all right, one, I have to leave, and two, like, I am so much more than just this like yes person. Like, I have boundaries too, and I deserve to be respected, and I also deserve to be met with softness when I am going through and I am unworking and I am unlearning all of the internalized, all of the internalized shit that living in this society has also like, put on me, even if it doesn't necessarily benefit you, because I haven't completely learned how to negotiate my boundaries just yet. And so I think now, like after that moment, I basically just became more bold in terms of how I negotiate my boundaries and how I say what I want and what I need. Like, even if it means for me to like write a script beforehand to like support myself. And I know that that sounds weird, and maybe people don't think that that and gender are connected, but I really think they are very connected. Like, we've been taught to relate to one another and how we've been taught to express ourselves. And so, yeah, I think like just in general, as a femme now, I don't think about like, oh, they're not going to perceive me as this if like, or they will perceive me as this if I do this way. Like, I nip that in the bud and I say, you know what? How they're perceiving me is none of my business at this point in time. Like, I need to take care of myself right now. And what I need is friends who are going to listen to my boundaries and respect them and support me in that. And if I can't have that, and if that person can't give that to me, then I need to leave.
All I can say is yes. Like, yes to all of that. Take it to church. Exactly. Like that's the truth. That feels so real to me. Especially because I just feel like, first of all, the whole thing about being perceived, I feel like I've been in a space where I'm like, don't perceive me. Don't do it. Don't perceive me. You don't need to. That's it. That's all I want to tell people. Don't perceive me. That was literally my Twitter app for a little while, was don't perceive me. That was it. That was my Twitter app for like a good couple months. I was like, do not. But also, I just feel like what you were saying about like the idea that we aren't allowed to have boundaries, I feel like comes so deep also into a historical context of white supremacy, that like, because Black men and folks who do not identify or who are put into the box of Black masculinity are also usually subjugated to this idea of immasculinity or emasculated, that then Black women and femmes had to take this role of caring for community, of caring for children, of caring for other men, of caring for other women and femmes, that it then became a thing, that it became almost a responsibility for us to put our needs on the back burner for our community, for our people. I know like Joy James talks about it being like the captive maternal, which is that like we literally cannot have anything other than the need to take care of others. And that actually perpetuates ideas of white supremacy, that we can't take care of ourselves and that we can't actually create healthy bonds and relationships, because there is this looming idea that we have to take care of everyone else for everybody else to be good, no matter how much it detriments us. And I just felt like that was something I was feeling so much, as well as somebody who started using they and, working more towards using more they, them pronouns, and really understanding that like womanhood was also not the entire encompassing of my experience and what I felt that represented me on a day-to-day basis. It really felt that these things were, again, still being put on me as being like, this is how somebody perceives me, and this is how somebody is going to then treat me. So that wasn't a full coherent thought,
But I'm just saying, like, all of that really resonated with me, especially about like the way that we're perceived and then how that directly correlates to the ways that people treat us, specifically as Black women and femmes. It just can be so easy for folks to, again, just be like, oh, well, you're so independent. You can hold it all. You can carry it all on your shoulders. It's fine, because that's what we're told that y'all can do, because that's what y'all have done through history. You guys have supported the community. You guys have supported history. You guys have supported the Black man, the Black woman, you know, everything in between. And no, it's like, that's actually also perpetuating white supremacy. That's perpetuating harm. That's perpetuating all of the things that we're also trying to unlearn. Is like this idea that we also can't have boundaries. Like the ways that I even think about like my mother and my aunts and the women and femmes in my family, and the ways that they don't have boundaries with each other all the time. And they usually don't have boundaries also with the other men in my households. The boundaries that they don't have with one another and in our families was so apparent that it's like, what else was I also supposed to learn? What else was I supposed to be conditioned to, if not only seeing the women and femmes in my family literally be stripped down to their bone to just try to take care of people that also would systematically harm them? So I felt like that was also something that was coming up for me in what you were talking about.
So yeah, both of y'all are literally talking about shit. Number one. Number two, I really what both of you all said really reminded me of two things. One is that I feel like along the lines of what Jess was saying, that I feel like when I was with cis and heterosexual men, I feel like I did feel like I was being made to be put into like this, you have to act like this is the role that you are supposed to play in this relationship. And not to say that I like went more into my queer identity because I was trying to, I guess, well, no, yes, I went more into my queer identity because I was trying to escape that, because that in line with who I was. And I feel like when I actually had my first girlfriend, I was really shocked at the way that she internalized misogyny, in terms of like, she was the more masculine one in the relationship and she automatically put on me to be the more feminine one in the relationship. And so there would be things where she'd be like, well, why are you dressing like that? Or why are you talking like that? Like, you're only doing that because, you know, dude just do that. And then now you're only moving like that because guys, like, almost trying to accuse me of internalized misogyny because I'm not moving the way that she perceives feminine women should move, if that makes sense. And I think that it really made me like, I don't know, it really kind of set me to be like, wow, like, I don't know, the ways that we can all internalize misogyny is very interesting. But even within like the queer community, and like even thinking about our queer identities and the roles that we have to have in relationships when there's not like the typical man and woman, and like having to like be like, well, this is the role that you have to take on since you look like this. And because I look like this, and because this is how everybody's can perceive us. So let's already just like delegate these roles and these tasks. I also feel like in understanding that, I thought for a long time my gender identity was something that that wasn't worth exploring. Like I thought, like, I felt like the default was just like, I'm a Black woman. There's so much more harder shit that I have to go through than to like, for me to sit there and be like, okay, so what does femininity mean to me? And I remember after that relationship, I sat down and I was just like, well, why can't I give that thought? Why can't I give that consideration? If I'm such a multi-faceted person, isn't this an equal part of my experience that deserves thought and consideration and exploration? And yeah, I feel like, I don't know, I feel like even that is something, I don't think that I was even given the option to say that you don't have to align with femininity in the way that you've been taught it, and that there's other ways of being, and that is allowed. I think that Black femmes, period, aren't even taught that there's other options. And I think for a long time, I think the big theme in my life is just like, what other ways can I exist as, or like, what other ways can I express myself? What does that look like for me? Because I felt like I was discovering all these new parts of myself, but I didn't know how to like express them, or I didn't know how they were going to like move with the person that I was. And I also, like somebody was saying, like, was thinking about just like how people perceive me, and that just being my main concern. I think that for a long time I was thinking about my pronouns, but I felt like my first thought was like, well, you know, I don't want to have to explain to people, and then they're gonna feel uncomfortable. And then I thought the same. I was like, well, why is that my initial thought? And it's just so interesting. I feel like the ways that we, like you said, we don't create boundaries, and we're just not taught, I feel like, to just explore ourselves, and then to, like, after that exploration, to be like, okay, so this is the person that I am, and you're going to treat me like this, and that's just it. I feel like we're not even given the option that we can do that. So yeah.
For me, I think going into the wilderness requires like a deep understanding of your intuition, and realizing that, like, me existing as I please is me using my imagination. And that my imagination doesn't look like everybody else. Like, it's directly tied to me. And like what Olivia said earlier, like considering like other ways of thinking. Like, even the thought of like, oh, let me be considerate to myself. Like, that in itself is like a huge win. Like, when you have other people not telling you or giving, like, affirming that like your permission to do that is valid. Like, it's not selfish. Like, it's you preserving your life. Like, my life has a meaning outside of this relationship and onward. Like, it's not tied to like your expectations of me. And so, like, for me, like, art has been truly like the only love that I can think of, that I can also share pieces of myself and also get to know other people at the same time. That's just what I wanted to share, because that was just in my head.
Going off what you said, I feel like, and like personally, and like in other relationships I see around myself, a lot of people forget to like, they forget about individualism, and like how like they're people outside of their own relationships, and a lot of times they get attached to their partner, and like they start losing themselves in a way. Like a lot of times, like they start to forget like some stuff. Oh, my favorite color is this or this and this. Or, like I like to do this and this, and they start to lose themselves. And I feel like it's very hard to be vulnerable in relationships in fear of just like possibly losing yourself in a way, I guess. So yeah, that's all I really have to say.
I really want to piggyback off of that, because I think it's something I'm really sitting with my partner, who is a cis man, and I recently came out as pansexual, and having some really intentional conversations with him, in also understanding that it's, for me, it was less about losing parts of myself because of being in the relationship, but it was losing parts of myself because of the vulnerability, because I was worried that if this person doesn't hold me in the ways that I need, in the ways that I'm asking for, in the ways that maybe I haven't asked for, right? I'm still working on how to be like, no, that is something I'm still working on. Even with my partner, he will be like, are you sure? Like, be honest. Because I wear my heart on my sleeve. So he'll be like, I can see on your face you want to say no. And I'm like, okay, so no, right? So just take that, right? But even in parts like that, it's that fear that we're also not going to be accepted. Like I feel like, I forget who was just saying it, Jess or Carrie, but also talking about, again, that fear, but also that want to be deeply understood and to be deeply seen. We all want to be perceived, but we don't want to be perceived as, part of this talk in a monolithic way. We want to be perceived in the full breadth of ourselves, in the fullness of ourselves. And so for me, that does mean some days I'm gonna wear a dress, I'm gonna look cute, I'm gonna feel very feminine. And some days I'm gonna also feel very feminine, and I'm gonna wear like baggy pants, cargo pants, and I'm gonna wear a t-shirt, and I'm gonna wear my head wrap, and you're not gonna see any of my hair, and you're not gonna see any of my skin. That's also gonna be me expressing my femininity. And having that also be something that is so scary, I feel like, that it is in relationships, is that we, not even just, I even think about in romantic relationships, but also just in the relationships of being friends with people, of building bonds with people, that we are saying that we need to meet each other in the space that we need to understand each other and our whole selves. But that also means understanding yourself in your whole self, allowing yourself to be whole, even in the ways that you might not like. Owning the parts of myself that do fawn, that do let people off the side, that do give people too many chances, and saying that that is also a part of me because I deeply love people and I deeply believe in the people's capacity to change, right? So also being able to hold all the different parts of ourselves, to hold different parts of people. And like, you know, I think people are always like laughing on me because I always am like trying to go back to the structural, but I do believe that it is a structural thing, that we have to put ourselves in boxes, that our society needs us to put ourselves in boxes to subjugate us, to say, these are the people that are subjugated and these are the people that are not. And so to put people in boxes allows us to also not see each other in our full breath and not see ourselves in our full breath. So I even think that, again, it's deep entrenched in the ways that our society has created the ways that we can even bond with one another. And so I even feel that in so many different ways, and something I'm deeply working on is how do I learn myself more so that I can have capacity to actually learn about other people and hold other people in their entirety. Because if I'm being punitive, if I'm being, you know, like just down on myself, like giving myself no grace, giving myself no breath, not allowing myself to see that I'm also somebody who fucks up, who makes mistakes, who also won't hold it all, then how am I going to hold that for somebody else when they fuck up, when they make mistakes, when they can't hold it all? And of course, also knowing again that like there are boundaries. There's ways that some people hurt you and it has to be clipped. It has to be done. Like that's also a boundary. But that's also not, again, me saying that I'm not seeing you in your entirety. That's also just saying the ways that I am now engaging with myself can no longer support the way that you're engaging with me. But be easy, right? Keep pushing over that way, right? No disrespect to you, but as you were saying, Carrie, like you no longer can engage in my space because it's only bringing me harm for you to be here. And that's also me knowing me caring for me holding me. So I'm just like sitting with also what you were just saying, like all y'all were just saying, and really feeling like all of these things have been deeply resonating with me. I'm like a journaler, so I be writing things down. I love journaling. So that's like, I feel like these are things I've been journaling so much about recently. And like, how do I actually hold myself in my entirety, even the parts that I don't necessarily like or think are strong or think are beautiful or think are whole, to be able to hold that for other people as well.
Wow, that was some real ass shit. I'm not gonna lie. I don't know what to say. Like that was like wow. Like I feel like this talk came at a very interesting, like specific time in my life where I feel like it needed to happen, and the things that everyone's saying, I feel like I needed to hear. And yeah, I feel like well, I don't know. Well, yeah, I don't think anybody would know, but right now I'm in graduate school to be a therapist, and I feel like a lot of the work that therapist and a lot of the work that that we're like learning has a lot to do with self-reflection and just being able to like not get triggered. Like if a client says something to you that reminds you of something that you're also going through, and also being able to create boundaries so that you're able to support them while also like you're able to support them effectively. And I think that what Queen was saying about like just how do I hold all of myself so that I can fully support somebody else, I think has been like the theme of my life, because I feel like I've realized that I feel like I'm realizing every day that I do not know myself, and that there are ways that I haven't like, there are questions that I haven't asked myself that I really need to ask myself. And I think I also have like a big list of questions in my phone because I feel like I'm always coming up with like existential questions, but I feel like the questions are also answers in a way, because it's making me look at myself and be like, wow, like I didn't even know my mind could go that far. Or I didn't even think I could look at something like that. And I feel like when I am in situations where I'm continuously giving to people, knowing that I don't know all of myself and knowing that I don't have the capacity to do so, I'm just almost like shutting off or just like not giving the proper like love to that part of myself to like even like discover what do I like, what don't I like what makes me feel good, what makes me happy when I am feeling like shit, what can I do to even make me feel better. Like I don't know, I feel like we're constantly in like go mode of just like taking care of people, doing what we need to do, and then I don't know, I feel like I've definitely needed a break of just being like, okay, who am I? And how do I show up in this world? Like, what does that mean for like who I am on a day-to-day basis, and really just holding all of myself. I feel like I've been like trying to figure out how to do that. And also just in what you were saying, just like as like what's it called? What am I trying to say? Holding yourself, but then also making room to discover all these different parts of yourself, like at the same time. And also just the whole idea of like how everything can be simultaneous. Like I can not have boundaries, but you know, at the same time, I'm not gonna take certain shit and I ain't like what the fuck you said. Like, you know what I mean? Like both can exist at the same time. So I've been just trying to figure all of that out. So I definitely feel you on that one.
Olivia, I'm also in grad school. Yes. And I'm pursuing therapy also.
Oh, wow.
And it's so cute. Also, I realized that my college specifically does not have the structure in place to hold me like I need to be held. And leaving when I feel violated. And letting my teachers know that, hey, this happened. This is not acceptable for me moving forward. And this is my happy medium in order for me to engage with you. And I cried about it afterwards because I also realized that crying is a release for me. Like I can't hold all that emotion in. And I was crying and I was angry and I was crying and I felt devastated. I was crying and I was nervous. Like all of that. Like I was feeling all of these emotions. And I initially I was like, I feel really guilty for having a wide range of emotions right now in the span of 15 minutes. Because that, for me, that was a lot. It was overwhelming. And being able to ask for help in those 15 minutes so I can get to a place of calmness and like understand like I can't go through all this by myself. It is very hard, and allowing people to help me because my default is are you sure if you let them in, are you sure, and like having like intentional conversations about like, hey, like I'm very nervous about accepting help. And I also know that I need help. So I'm calling you to accept it. And if I'm reluctant, I apologize, but can you treat me with grace throughout this? It's a lot of ands, a lot of ands, and realizing that it's okay.
I apologize for taking up space. I also want to make sure that we are also all being able to put in our 2 cents. And I am really, really feeling what you were just saying, Carrie, about really just understanding that you need it. You need collective care. Like, I think I've been talking about that a lot as somebody who does more community-based processes of dealing with harm and violence and conflict that don't rely on police, that don't rely on institutions, that don't rely on the same cycles of violence that perpetuated in the first place. It also comes into an idea that we can't do this work alone. None of this work is individual work. All of this work is collective work. And the only way actually I can hold all of me is actually to let people in, to let me know and validate me and support me in growth and pushing myself. Because that is also a part of this process. The part of this process is that we're told to be so individualistic. We're told to put it all on ourselves. We're told that we only can, like rely on ourselves. And that's not true. I mean, at least in my experience, I have seen the growth and breadth of when communities really support each other and show out for each other and support one another through grief, through joy, through hardship, through honesty. And seeing that has really given me hope, but also understanding how hard that is to do on a consistent basis, to constantly be putting yourself out there and put yourself on the edge and to feel that your vulnerability might not always be held in the ways that you want or the ways that you need is so scary for me. Like, I'm like, okay, I might as well just keep it to myself then if I know you're not going to hold it in the ways I need. But also knowing that that's also means that I'm never going to have it held in the ways I need if I never go about it. So even in holding it that way, or trying to push myself and holding it more that way, has really allowed me to do more of that reflective work, and also know that this reflective work can't be done by myself, that I have to be doing it with my sisters, with my friends, with my partner, because that's also going to create growth for the people around me that I want to hold me better. Of, hey, I've been thinking about this. I need to see what you're thinking about. Have you even thought about this? Have you even thought about our relationship in this way? If you haven't, can we talk about it together? Because this is what I'm thinking about. And I really need to know how you're feeling it. And like, I just started doing that work with my family, and like, it is interesting, let me tell you. But also it feels deeply emotional and deeply vulnerable, because these are the people that have also known me my entire life. I mean, me and my sisters are all 2 years apart. So we've really grown up with each other, like each other's best friends, each other's worst enemies, each other's bullies, each other's ride or dies. We are all, we've all seen each other through that growth. And so also being able to hear them say, I've actually seen you grow. I've seen you hold boundaries better. I've seen you do it this way. And I've also seen you not change these ways. I've seen this, and here's how I can support you in doing that, has felt like something that is also really, really affirming for me, and knowing that my growth also doesn't have to be all on me. And I think that also takes like some weight off of my back, that like, actually, this is a collective growth that I'm engaging with. Even if it's just me that's growing, it is a collective growth. And that will also maybe help other people grow as well. But just really also thinking about that.
I love that. I also have older sisters, very close to my heart. And seeing how we've supported each other through the years has been really beautiful to me. And I think like being in a different environment, from like high school to college, I've really learned that like I cannot really be friends with people who don't hold me accountable and are not like pushing me to grow in a lot of different ways, because at that point it just feels like, okay, yeah, we can laugh and stuff, but it's not nearly as deep as the friendships where it's like, what are you going through? Or like, hey, I know that like you do this a lot, like, no, you need to tell them how you feel, you need to like set this boundary and stuff. I just don't think I can do it anymore, you know? That's just all I was thinking while you're talking. And I think I'm just a very community minded person in general. And it's so strange um, when I have interacted with people who are very individualistic. And it's just like there's not really much of a sense of like, oh yeah, if this person is going through this, it's going to affect me in this way, or like I really affect others in the community. No real sense of connection to each other. I just found that to be really frustrating. I don't know if anyone else has, but yeah. And especially because I'm Ugandan American. And so coming from a deeply collectivist culture to like the US was just culture shock, like at 20 years old, still culture shock. So
Along those same lines, I just wanted to ask like one quick question, just to like expand what we are talking about. But in what ways have you seen Black femmes reject individualism and engage in collectivism in healthy ways? I'm just curious.
I can share a story. And during my undergrad, I had a TA. Their name is Monisha, and ever since like I met them, like they have been like the biggest light in my life. Like I went to their office hours, and they were like, "Are you queer? It's okay if you are." And I was like, I was so shocked. like I was so shocked. I was like, I really like I am. How did you know? Like, are we friends now? Um, and ever since that day in undergrad, we have been very connected. They helped me through like my entire process for grad school, sent me like a draft of how to write a narrative statement because I was very frustrated. Like I never did this before. Um, like there for me, like in times of like me like sadness, and for me to like see someone do that, like because my perception at that time of school was like everyone in school is so mean, like they're just not genuine. That was my perception at the time in undergrad, and I was like, no, there's people here that care deeply about you and your well-being. And when I met Monisha, she changed my life. Like I that's when I knew. I was like, okay, people exist in school that care about you, and you need to give them a chance. You need to make room for that and allow them to help.
Yeah, I like, it's interesting because I deeply think that like Black femmes, and in a lot of respects, like many Black women too, are very, very good at holding collective community space. And I think it sort of goes back to what you were saying, Olivia, about like being forced to do that, like that role sort of being forced upon us for so long, especially like thinking about like coloniality and the ways that like gender roles have sort of played out for us, and like the combination of like race and gender as well. But I think I've seen it happen in ways that like work that caretaking, which often when it's foisted and forced upon us can very much feel like a burden. In these spaces, it just feels like pure joy, just collective joy. And I think like that's sort of the thing that most resonates with me. Like, I mean, in college, I had quite a few spaces. I mean, like, I always tell people, like, I pretty much did not have any, like, many non-Black friends in college, especially, like, people who I, like, really even didn't have, like, men friends in college, like, at all, like, regardless of race. But, like, most of my community was, like, Black women, Black femmes, and Black queer folks. And I was just always stunned and amazed how, like, going to a university that just so clearly feels like it is not made for your existence, how we were still able to very much so affirm our existences in these spaces. And a lot of it was very much so making room for the unspoken to be spoken, and being able to like be our genuine selves all together, and feeling like we could and wanted to witness one another's genuine selves, so that we could come more deeply into our own selves. Like I always thought that exchange was like so beautiful, because it's one of the many that's like not exploitative, one of the many that was not extractive in any way, but that always felt very like mutually loving and mutually beneficial in like every single dimension. And if I'm being so real, it is one of the hardest parts, I think, about being maybe out of a university setting in some ways. Because I honestly feel like we had like a microcosm of something that like I've never experienced before in like the real world. And like now that I'm out of school and like I am not currently in grad school, like I'm just sort of winging it with life. I'm just like, damn, I miss my people. And I feel like I'm consistently having to look for, curate, find community spaces with with people who are just as interested in like affirming other people's existences as they are having their own existences. Yeah.
Jess, I think a lot of what you're talking about reminds me of like family of origin versus chosen family. I've just found like, I don't know, Black femmes just have a totally different energy to them. There's just something about, I think, not being able to fully count on your family of origin, learning what you don't want to feel again, that really propels you to say, like, no, I'm going to make sure everyone feels affirmed, loved, celebrated, valued exactly for who they are. Even things like in this discussion, and like terms like, exploring the wilderness of like fully understanding someone, or like the breadth of people, like, y'all, this PWI is like hurting, and this is just so refreshing to me to just hear such truths spoken like that.
I feel like one example I have, a like story of just collective care. I feel like it's when I went to undergrad, and I met my group of friends. I feel like in high school, I did not have the friendships that I feel like I deserved in a sense. Like I feel like it just wasn't supportive. It wasn't kind of like accepting me as like a changing person. Like it was very much like, well, you were like this when I met you, so I don't understand where all this new shit is coming from. Um, and I think that when I went to one specific moment actually with one of my good friends that I was roommates with for like 2 years, her name's Medusa. Um, I remember like, so I'm a very shy person. Like I'm down for a good time though. Don't get me wrong, but I'm a little scared. Like I'll be like, I'm kind of like the person who's like, mom is like, you better not get in trouble. And I'm really scared to get in trouble, but I'm willing to do a little something. We just got to make sure the situation's safe. Once I know it's safe, I'll be like, all right, I'll follow your lead. So my friend Medusa, when we were in DC, like we were trying to get into some shit, as always. And I remember one specific moment we were at the club and we were trying to get into a section, and I was so scared because I don't know why I thought the bouncer was gonna be like, why y'all over here? And I wasn't trying to get embarrassed. I was like, all right, sis, we're gonna have to figure out how to plan this well. And I was so scared. I remember she turned around and looked at me. She was like, Olivia, I will never put you in a situation where you feel uncomfortable or you feel unsafe. Like I know that you're nervous, but I know that you want to have a good time, and I just really need you to trust me. But know that we're gonna get in, and we're gonna have a really nice time. I promise. Like it's okay that you're scared. Like I don't want to make you feel. And I don't know. I feel like I always felt for a long time that I was like the scary friend and the friend that cared too much about not breaking the rules, and that I always I felt like that, but then I always felt kind of like, well, why can't my friend just love me for who I am at the end at the end of the day? Like I'm not the party pooper, but I'm just like, I need you to kind of understand where I'm coming from. Like it's not like irrational fear. And I think that in her like validating that and her being like, I know why you're scared, it makes sense, but I got you. And we are gonna do this, we're gonna have fun. Just in her doing that, I never had like another Black femme do that for me. And I think that in that moment I was like, nah, like she really fucks with me. Like we're here. She gets me. She's not making me feel bad about feeling scared. And I don't know, it's like she's not gonna be like, oh my gosh, like she's trying to be scary. So it's like, let me just like leave her alone and let me just, you know what I mean? Like getting mad at me or whatever the case may be. And so when I think of collective care, that's what I think of. And I think that even in that moment, like I feel like that moment has extended throughout our entire friendship, even from the moment where I told her that I did like girls, and she was just like, oh, okay, all right. And then just kept it moving. And I was like, oh, that's it. And she was like, yeah. What else did you thought I was gonna freak out? And it just like little things like that. I'm just like, wow, like you really fuck with me. And so yeah, that's what I think of when I think of collective care. Like somebody really, really messing with you and really being like, I have your best interest at heart. I am cheering for you and your growth and your evolution, wherever that may take you and however that may look for you. I'm supporting you in that. So
Yeah, I'm really resonating. And honestly, sitting in like some deep envy, I think, of some of the ways that some of y'all have like received collective care in some of these really beautiful ways. Um, I think for me, one way was last summer, during many of the protests that were happening in Boston, for movement for Black lives, against police brutality, in response to the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Tony McDade, Ahmaud Arbery, and so many others. There were protests that I had been a part of organizing, that had been deeply overturned by white men who had just wanted to riot, just wanted to incite violence, and police who had just wanted to engage in hurting young Black folks. And again, exercising their power of dominance. And after one protest that had happened in May last year, where they had locked us in, they had put barricades around so nobody could leave the premises. They had tear gassed us. They had shut down all the trains so we couldn't even get out of the spaces. People had to walk home an hour or 2 hours just to get home. Myself and other Black and brown women and femmes had come together and said, we will never let this happen again. And we created mutual aid funds and ride services for people who were going to get to and from protests. And in that moment, and through that, I think, like grief and pain that I think so many of us were feeling, of not feeling like, how had we never thought to take care of each other like this before? It was also a reminder for us that we can do better, and that it is more than just one person to do it, that it actually, again, creates and requires collective care. And we started doing these things at protests, which is called pod mapping, which is basically an idea of how you are creating a community of people that will support you when you have engaged in harm and support you when you have also experienced harm. And the intentional work you have to do to talk with people about them being on your pod, them being in your space, them being in your community. And the conversations that people were having, and the conversations I was having with some of my friends about, like, hey, I respect you enough. And I feel like we have that relationship where if I fuck up, I know you can be like, I love you, and you fucked up here. And also to have also those other friends that are like, hey, I know that I've been harmed. I need you to come here and do this. And let's talk about what both of our capacities can be to support each other. So that even if you're not there with me, all I got to do is send you an emoji, right? Like one of me and my friends, all we have to do is send each other an octopus emoji during protests. And we know that shit has gone down, and we need to look at each other's locations and call each other a lift. And that's all we got to do. So I think in those moments, it really solidified for me specifically last summer that collective care was individual care, that some of the only ways that I could receive care, that I could receive safety, that I could receive love was if it was actually done by a community of people that work together to define it for ourselves and to create what we wanted that to be for ourselves. And I think that for me felt so powerful and felt just so intentional in the ways that we were really able to also imagine a future for each other about what care could look like, about care that did not exist in our current system, in our current society, and still in this like really, futuristic, like sci-fi idea of like pod mapping, actually create that for ourselves. And so I think for me, that was like a really intentional moment where it wasn't collective care at the expense of my own care or the care of other people, but it was actually all of us thinking about like, what does interdependence mean? Not codependence, not like parasitic relationships, but actually that I lean on you and you lean on me in the ways that actually support us in growth and support us in not feeling burnt out and not feeling drained and not feeling like we don't have anything left to give to ourselves at the end of the day. And so I think like that for me was like a moment of collective care that really changed also like the ways that I had to think about caring for myself and caring for other people. That was like very, very transformative, I think, for me in this past year.
Along the same lines, just had another question. Or does anybody want to respond before I go to the next question? Okay, so the next question I had was, is individualism a privilege? So just because we talked a lot about collective care, so I'm just interested, I guess, like in that connection, like is being able to call ourselves an individual and being able to explore that a privilege?
Yes. I mean, I think it's a privilege in terms of like structurally, those who have the resources and those who often have the capacity to be able to not just, I mean, yeah, to be able to like have the time and the space to not only think about, but freely enact who they are as an individual without incurring harm. Yeah, I mean, like, we all know who those people are, right? Like, it's people with money, rich folks, people, not even just rich, like, it's people who, like, simply have the means to be able to provide for more than their needs financially. White people, like cis people, like it's people who fit into like the norm, whatever is deemed normal in sort of the societal structure a lot of the time. But it shouldn't be like that. That's not the world I want to live in. Like, I do want to live in the world where everyone is able to get as specific as possible about themselves so that they may know how it is that they, in their most embodied selves, are able to be in community with everyone else, right? So like, I do really think that the individualism can be, or I guess I wouldn't even call it individualism, but just like a rigorous self-awareness is very much so like required and necessary to be in community with other people. And also like not everyone even has the time to like think about themselves. How can I possibly think about me, myself, and my needs when I'm busy trying to literally put food on the table for myself to eat and for my kids to eat, and like, and still, you know, like I want to completely acknowledge that like our ancestors in so many ways like found a way to do that, but the barriers that they had that were like put in their faces that impeded them from doing that, that impeded them from being able to do that when they were children, right? Maybe some of them didn't even get a chance to do that before they left this plane, like before they left this world. I mean, like, those things are very, very real. So yeah, like in the current system that we're in so many ways, there's so many material things that go along with being able to figure out what individualism means for you. And I see in the chat, in the chat, when you said capitalism is a disease, because it is. It literally is. It alienates you from yourself.
To continue on what you just said, having the language to describe what you want and need is a privilege. In real time, to name the things that you care about and just in real time, that's a privilege. And I have realized that like when I'm reflecting on like my relationships with my parents and like the sacrifices that they made for me to explore myself in real time, and the tension that I have with them because like in the result of their sacrifices, and like what building a relationship with them like separately and realize like they're both human, and like outside of being my parent, like they are also living in this world too. And although I don't know their full story, I know a glimpses of it, like the same, they deserve grace too in whatever way that is comfortable and safe. And sometimes that means me having boundaries with my parents. Even when I know that is necessary, and me understanding like this is for both of our like existence, because I can't be my best self and talk to you in the best way if I feel harmed.
Boundaries with parents. What is that? What is that? Tell me, teach me, please. I am working on that. Let me tell you, that is so real though. I feel like Olivia was just saying about how this talk is telling me some things that I've been sitting with, but I also needed to hear. That was something I needed to hear, because I also believe in deeply what you're saying, Carrie, about being able to express yourself, your needs, based and connecting that also to, as Jess was talking about, your material reality, the actual ways that you move through the world, the things that you are and are not permitted to have and do is a privilege. Because like you said, if you're not able to actually take time for yourself, if you're not able to actually feel that you are an individual, that you are somebody who can live for yourself, right? Going back to like the idea of the captive maternal, like all the captive maternal in all of us thinks is that we only need to care about the people around us. We only need to save the people around us. And that will maybe save ourselves. Because then if we self-sacrifice enough, if we think about how much we can sacrifice enough, then hopefully everybody will be so good that then people can take care of us. But that's just not the case. Because again, that's not having boundaries. That's not actually engaging and holding people in truth and honesty and in love. And just holding that idea that like individualism is a privilege, but also is something that deeply divides us. Like, what is healthy individualism? What is understanding yourself as an individual that also isn't you not feeling like you don't owe anybody anything? Because I think white supremacist ideas of individuality is that you are extractive, that you actually don't have care for anybody else but yourself, that you are individualistic in ways that means that you will exploit others to do anything that it means to make it to the top, to get yours. Because we live in a society where it is either you or me. Either you have a house or I don't. Either I have a house or you don't. That is how our society literally is. It's who has it and who doesn't. That then individualism has been inextricably like linked with selfishness. And so I have really been thinking about what does it actually mean to be an individual that isn't linked to this idea of whiteness of individuality. That means that you don't owe anybody anything. That means that you're not connected to people, that you're not connected to a lineage, to a collective, is something that I feel like is so hard to sit with, especially as like an oldest child in a Black family where like all of everything is like, you need to take care of your sisters. You need to take care of your younger siblings. You need to do this. You need to do that because you are the oldest. You need to set the example. You can't make mistakes. You can't, trip over because you are the one who's supposed to be leading. You're the one who's supposed to be setting the example. So you can't have grace for yourself. It's something that I've really been sitting with my family and the ways that I have messed up. My sisters have seen me mess up more times than they could probably count. And they still hold me as all parts of me. And that was something that also my parents had, because that was how their parents told them to engage with their younger siblings. And that's how they engaged with us as children, that they had to completely give up entire parts of themselves to be a parent, because they had to, because to be able to put food on the plate, like y'all were saying, to be able to get us into the schools that they wanted us to get into, to be able to get us the resources that they wanted to. My parents definitely had to give up things that, at least from having conversations with my mom, were deeply a part of her, were deeply connected to who she saw as herself. And that the fact that she had to put that to the side to engage in that idea also of like the nuclear family. I've been like sitting with that as like getting older and people asking about kids and family. And I'm like, I don't know if that's something I even want to reproduce. I don't even know if that's something I want to engage in, because is that something that's just going to keep creating harm? If I'm only seeing that the nuclear family, the mom, the dad, the child is actually only just going to reproduce this idea that as a mother, I have to give up certain things. I have to give up a certain amount of myself to raise a child, to support a child. And what does it actually mean to be a parent or be a sibling or be a family member that is also holding my full honesty and my boundaries? That also doesn't mean completely also stripping other people of their fullness and their boundaries. So that was a little bit of a tangent, but I don't know, Carrie, that was like, talking about parents and boundaries. I was like, that is so hard for me to even fathom for such a long time, because my family has never even known how to put boundaries on anybody unless you're a child. Children are the only people that have boundaries in my household. And that's rough. And it's something I've been sitting with. So I appreciate y'all letting me go on that little tangent, but it's definitely connected to me about individualism, that all this starts at home. You learn all these things at home.
Just to go off, because like about the whole parent thing, yeah, I feel like as a fellow older sister, I feel like it's always just been like, you're setting the example. You have to be the one to watch after them. You have to like, it's even been to the extent of just like, when you order food, you better ask if everybody else is hungry before you order food, because that's just rude. And it's just being like, oh my gosh. And yeah, I feel like boundaries is something that honestly, like in terms of like my mom, like me and my therapist have like diligently been working on, because I feel like it's been ingrained in me to think about other people's feelings before my own, and to consider how other people are going to feel about the choices that I make. And I think that has really almost stifled me, in the sense of like me being nervous to do things that I feel like are good for myself, or me questioning whether like, oh, is that good or is that selfish? Or like, is that like, and just not being able to balance between the two, and always feeling conflicted. And I feel like also another thing mentioned was, what's it called? I feel like for me, I've always been the person that's like, and I think this is mostly honestly like on self-care Twitter, which really be like kind of making me be like, is this whole like, oh, I don't owe anybody else an explanation. If I have to do whatever I have to do for my self-care, I'm gonna do it, and fuck everybody else. Like that has never sat well with me. And I'm just like, okay, well, you don't owe anybody explanation, but like you don't have to be mean. Like it isn't like those two things don't have to, like, both can exist together. Like, and I feel like I've always been like, why does taking care of yourself have to come at the expense of other people? But then it's also just like, I don't know, just kind of I think that both, I don't know, the simultaneous has been a theme of my life. So I truly believe that two things can exist together. Like just in the way that like you can always compromise between the two things, but it doesn't always have to be a this or that type of situation. And I think that people make boundaries and individualism and just like taking care of yourself a very this or that situation, in terms of like, oh, like if this person is not doing what I need to do, I'm just cut them off. Like no questions asked. I'm not even gonna waste my time on giving them an explanation, because I need to move forward with my life. No negative energy. I'm not doing none of that shit. And it's like, okay, well, this, like, I don't know. It's like, it don't gotta be like that. Like, I don't know. I feel like, yeah, I just, that really resonated with me. And also just like, yeah, like why do we feel bad when we do make decisions that are better for ourselves? And why are we, yeah, and just in particular with our parents, like I feel like that's just, I don't know. Yeah, I feel like why do we feel bad when we make decisions for ourselves? And why do we feel always conflicted to be like, oh, like this is gonna make this person feel bad, but we also need to take care of ourselves? Like, I don't know. I feel like we need to start thinking that if I don't do this for myself, then I can't possibly like show up for this other person. So how can we work together so that both needs can be met? has been something that I've really been thinking about, because I feel like I've just been meeting this very this or that type situation. Like, we cannot exist together. We both cannot be healthy together. We both can't understand each other. And it's just like, why not? So yeah, thank you for saying that.
I have so many thoughts. Like, first of all, I've been thinking about who even has led the whole self-care movement. And I feel like it's been a lot of white people in counseling, in therapy. And like, as a psych major who's not a white person, it's been frustrating just like even hearing the way things are taught. Like, oh yeah, like you said, like cutting people off, or like me being like, oh, but I'd like want to talk about this, or like offer some explanation or try and work through it. And it's like, no, they hurt you, just move on. Like things like that, where it's like so dichotomous. And I think that's just another tenet of white supremacy, this like either or, black and white thinking. Kind of like, I think it was Queen who said it, but it's like, it's you or me, just goes back to that. And I think I'm a little past that. And then relating that to individualism, I don't think it has to be either individualism or collectivism. I think it can be like appreciating who celebrating who you are on your own while also caring for those around you. Because I think I'm just a little over the whole, like, it's me at the end of the day. What is it? Keep your circle to just you and you, like all of that. Like, it's so exhausting. It's so exhausting. And we're not wired like that. We're wired for community and connection with others. It's not just supposed to be like me, myself, and I. It never was. So I think I'm just at a point in my life where I'm like trying to move towards, when it comes to boundaries, loving people from afar. I think that's helped me a lot. Just be like, you know what? Sending blessings your way. I hope you're doing well, and just keeping it to this level, like maybe a wave, and that's it. Because I've tried the whole cutting off completely, and that just, I don't know, that doesn't feel right. But then at the same time, I'm aware of everything that's been said about us feeling guilty and like a lot of shame about setting boundaries. So I'm sure it's a little bit of that too.
I think what everyone has said is like, I think the first thing that popped in my mind was like staying curious. I think about our relationships and being in community with other people. Yeah, I mean, I think that it, just in regards to like, I mean, at least for me, that always felt like some of the antidote to this like rugged, rough individualism. It's dog eat dog world, you eater, all that type of jazz. Um, because I mean, the thing is, we are always creating narratives, and we are always creating stories that preserve our existences. And sometimes those stories are not the things that we should be telling ourselves, right? I mean, our brains are our brains want us to like live, our brains want us to survive. And in a lot of ways, like sometimes that means us creating these false dichotomies and these false binaries in order to like preserve sort of that ego space and how we are thinking about ourselves and our own perceptions of self. But I do think that there is a way to still maintain self and accept all of the dimensions of self, even the ones that we don't like, by being able to remain curious to like the reasons why we do the things that we do, of course, but also the reasons why people do the things that they do, right? And like not making automatic assumptions when actions and things happen that feel like they are coming in conflict with how we understand who we are as people. I mean, that's not to say that like, before you get to that point, then you might not need to just take some space from someone or from a situation or something like that. Like there again, like there's so much nuance. Like there's so many ways to go about doing these things in order to simultaneously like care for yourself and care for like the other people. But I think like the nuance of that, like the nuance of getting curious instead of getting like competitive, I think it tends to be missing so much in a lot of the like, in a lot of the like understandings and knowledge of self-care as it relates to caring for others as well.
So everybody's saying just like amazing things. This conversation was just it was very well needed, at least for me. So we are going up on the 2 hour mark in about 7 minutes or so. And I want to be respectful of everybody's time. So I'm just going to ask one last question. So the last question is, when talking about individualism and learning identity, and why are all those conversations important to have, in your opinion?
I feel like they're very important because you have to like understand yourself in order to understand other people. And like I feel like that kind of also ties hand in hand with like intersectionality and stuff like that. And like a lot of people ask the question like, are you black first, are you woman first? And like you have to understand like many black femmes walk through this world. As a black woman, you can't separate them. They go hand in hand together. So I feel like it's very important to have conversations like that in order to understand how you feel and how like other people feel also, I guess. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with Clifford. I in the same way that like I want to be seen in the fullness of who I am, I also want to be able to see other people in the fullness of who they are. Like I want to be with people, and I also want to be safe, and I also want to like have joy, have love, have understanding, and I want those same things for myself as much as I want to like give them to other people. And I think the only way to really do that is to intimately get to know all of the monsters that capitalism and patriarchy and like all of the isms essentially have shoved under the bed for so long. We have to literally lift up the covers and get to know them, because this shit that we've been doing, it ain't working, baby. It hasn't been working. And I'm tired of being told that this is what my life is supposed to be like, that this is the extent of what my life can be like. There's so much more.
Yeah, really uplifting, both of those comments. And I feel, building off of that, I think conversations around identity, in contrast to like conversations around like representation, are like really, really important for me, to distinguish. Like, I don't want to be a representation of anything, but I do want you to understand how my identity and the identity of those who also are in alignment with me are affected by the systems that harm us or that uplift us. But representation politics is usually saying that I will be the monolithic representation of my race or of my gender or of my class. Identity politics is saying more about how we understand that it is a full breadth, and that there are many different ideas of how that identity experiences structural oppression or experiences community, experiences love, experiences joy. And so I feel like that's why it's so important to talk about identity, is because it actually creates more breadth in the spaces and communities that we exist in. And really going off of Jess's point, I think it also really allows us to talk about the ways that our identities have internalized some of the things that have harmed us, the ways that we have internalized, or I'll speak for myself, the ways I have internalized homophobia, the ways I've internalized racism, the ways I've internalized classism as a poor Black person. Those are things that I have to be honest about and think about how my identity has been affected by those to even be honest about how I've internalized them. So I feel like that's also why it's incredibly honest and true for us to talk about identity, because it also gives us grace that we are not perfect, that we are not a monolith, and that we are not a representation of something that still, even in its ability to try to make us feel seen, still feels extremely unattainable. So I feel like that's why identity for me is something that does need to be talked about, and does need to be talked about in the full scope of the people that are in that community, or the people that are in the space together.
Going off of what Jess said, I think not only does the harm need to stop, but we just need to heal as a community. And I know like a lot of Black femmes in my life, and a lot of people that I've met are all really on that road of like healing and breaking the cycle and, like ending those generational patterns. I really do want us to just reimagine what life can be like. It doesn't always have to be us like just, growing up to be our mothers or aunts, like we can be different. I just want us to be able to be different.